I have been and will continue to be it can be both guy. Very often, it can be both. Anytime somebody tries to make something black and white, I live in a lot of the time in the gray. And then there are situations where it cannot be both. And the Jim Harbaugh, Michigan sign stealing allegations cannot be both. It can't. It literally 100%, no matter what angle you try to take, it cannot be both. Somebody is lying. And we're going to get to the bottom of who it is. I just don't know that Michigan fans are going to be thrilled to find out who it is. It cannot be both that Michigan had employed a very elaborate sign-stealing operation, and Jim Harbaugh did not know about it. It's physically impossible for those two things to be true. That one, some rogue assistant or someone inside the football program at Michigan had employed former FBI, CIA, whatever, to go track down the signals in advanced scout, and Jim Harbaugh had no idea about it. It literally is not possible, because the first time that, let's say that that's true. Let's say Jim Harbaugh had no involvement in this whatsoever. The first time that somebody in a staff meeting says, now remember, when they put up the Indiana Pacers logo, they're going to do this. Jim Harbaugh doesn't go, well, how the hell do we know that? Come on. It cannot be both. There are times where I will err on the side of sometimes the one of the popular phrases now is, even if you didn't know, it's your job to know. And at some points that's true. For instance, there is in the college hockey world at Bowling Green State University, there were allegations of hazing. And they did this 10-page investigative report where eventually it came out that every year on the certain day that they took the freshmen and got them just blacked out drunk. And the coach didn't know. Legitimately did not know. The argument now is, well, he should have known. Should he have known that his kids are getting drunk on a Thursday night? Is that something that doesn't trickle up all the way to the head coach? Yeah, I think so. For instance, the hazing stuff at Northwestern, by many accounts, they were still doing the things that Pat Fitzgerald had done when he was a linebacker there in the 1990s. Then yes, he should have known. But that's a different topic, different day. You can't tell me, the whole point of sign stealing is so basically your coaches have a good idea of what's going on and how you can get out in front of it and have a plan for it. So the idea that the head coach had no involvement and, had no idea what was going on, blah, 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 blah. It cannot be both. The NCAA either is lying or Jim Harbaugh is lying. The problem is both are reasonable belief that they're both lying. But only one can be true. Only one in this scenario can be telling the truth, and only one can be lying. Because in the scenario I described, the first time that some quality control is there's not that and if there is this pattern of, say it was an offensive coordinator, a defensive coordinator, or a position coach, whoever, that tells these guys in the football program, I need you to go to the games before we play this opponent, steal their signals so we have an advantage. You're not doing that to keep that information from the most important guy in your program. That's not logical. And if you are, there's a reason for that, and that's because your program is run like the mafia, where the top guy has to have some plausible deniability and cannot be found culpable in the shady things that you're doing. So the idea that there's some gray area here does not exist. Either Jim Harbaugh is lying or Michigan is lying. Jim Harbaugh is lying and Michigan is lying. Or the NCAA is lying. And I can't, frankly, Wait to find out which one is which. So we've got that to look forward to. This is the Daily Huddle. I'm Garrett Seawright. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. We certainly appreciate it. Time for the Sunday stock report, taking a just overall overarching view of the college football world. In my Sunday stock report today, stock up for Tony Elliott. The Virginia Cavaliers get a big-time win over North Carolina. And the stock, Tony Elliott's stock as the Virginia Cavaliers head coach is still a penny stock. Like, he still might get fired at the end of the season. But if he doesn't, they can point to Saturday as the reason why he is going to be their head coach next year. If he is, in fact, still the head coach next year. Because a win like that can buy you an extra year, and an extra year can do all sorts of things for you. But that's a nice win for Virginia. They are not good at all in the slightest. And I mentioned last week that I don't think North Carolina is getting any credit because I don't know that it's deserved. But they lose a bad game to Virginia. And kudos to Tony Elliott because he hasn't had the easiest go of it at Virginia. It's nice to see him get a little stock up today. Jaden Daniels, the LSU quarterback, very, very good. I realize that they put 62 points on the board against Army West Point, not a juggernaut of a opponent by any means. I understand that. But Jaden Daniels has not gotten the credit that he deserves, I think, throughout the college football season because LSU lost to Florida State early and people wrote him off really quickly. But Jaden Daniels is playing at a really, really, really high level. How about Kyle Whittingham? Is there a more underrated college football coach than Kyle Whittingham? If there is, I don't know who jumps off the page because Utah is, I don't think, a super easy place to do the things that Kyle Whittingham has done as their head coach. And if you're a blue blood that has just fallen on hard times, how do you not? And I don't know if Kyle Whittingham's one of those guys that's going to be doing this till he's 75. I don't get that impression. But if you're a blue blood who's fallen on hard times, it's got to be real hard not to call Kyle Whittingham, doesn't it? Now, maybe he just flat out is never going to leave Utah. But I'm here to tell you, if I was it seems pretty clear that Florida has decided that Billy Napier is not their guy. Like, if somehow, some way, Texas A&M decides, like, hey, you know what? We're actually going to buy out Jimbo Fisher. It's hard not to call Kyle Whittingham, right? Now, he's not going to be the sexy pick. He's not going to be the young up-and-comer that's going to get everybody all frisky in their britches. But Kyle Whittingham's going to win you a lot of football games. And he's going to do it without being braggadocious or in the news for saying dumb things. I think he's a really good hire that somebody that plenty of schools have missed out on over the course of the last, 15 years. But that's a very good college football coach who I think is criminally underrated because he might be a top 5 to 10 coach in America. And I don't think that's outrageous. But Utah gets a win over USC. We'll talk about the Trojans here in a second. Air Force's Troy Calhoun, I think, is in that similar vein to Kyle Whittingham, where he hasn't gotten a Power 5 job strictly because he's run an option offense at Air Force, where he said, I'm not tied to the triple option. I'm not tied to playing the way that we have to play here at Air Force. And I will die on this hill that there are just some schools that you have to do something different to compete. Looking at you, Purdue, Texas Tech, Rutgers, Washington State, Vanderbilt. I think there are just some schools that if you are going to put together a successful football program, you can't do what everybody else does because you're not going to be able to out-recruit them. You're not going to be able to out-physical them. So you have to do something different. And I think Troy Calhoun will be a great hire for somebody else in the Power 5. But we'll have that coaching carousel talk later on down the season. But Air Force gets a win on the road at Navy, remains undefeated, and frankly are now in the driver's seat for the group of 5 spot in the New Year's 6, which if you go all the way back to August, I told you, I think Air Force is one of about 3 schools that can make the New Year's 6 game from the group of 5. The other 2, by the way, were Liberty Got that one right. I thought Boise State could. That didn't go so hot. And then Tulane. Well, here we are. Carson Steele, the UCLA running back, 3 more touchdowns this weekend in just a whopper of a win for the UCLA Bruins over Stanford, 42-7. Steele, 20 carries, 76 yards, 3 touchdowns. He transferred from Ball State, so it didn't get a ton of pub when you're playing college football in Muncie, Indiana, but transferred to UCLA and has had a couple of really, really, really big games so far this season. Had 30 carries, 141 against Washington State. Has really come on the last couple of weeks where he's now up to over 600 yards and 6 touchdowns. And 3 of those touchdowns coming in the win over Stanford. But Carson Steele playing really, really well as a junior running back out at UCLA. Now, for the stock downs, Brian Ferentz and Iowa's offense, I will die on the hill that if you are bad at offense in college football in 2023, it is a choice. And I think Brian Ferentz chooses to have Iowa suck at offense. Need to average 25 points a game. Right now it's 16. So they really got to ratchet it up here. I don't think it's going to happen. Brian Ferentz should lose his job. Now, there are people that will tell you that he has to score, they have to average 25 points for him to keep his job. No. He had to score 25 points per game to guarantee that he got to keep his job. I will believe that his father, and you can tell me that he reports to the Iowa athletic director all you'd like. I will believe that Brian Ferentz is fired as Iowa's offensive coordinator when me bleep turns purple and smells like rainbow sherbet. And not a second before that. When I see it hit the bottom line on ESPN, the Iowa Hawkeyes have fired offensive coordinator Brian Ferentz, I will believe that that is going to happen. And not a second before that. Iowa loses 12-10 on Saturday. You can complain about the fair catch call all you'd like. Doesn't matter. If you can hold your opponent to 12 points in college football in 2023, you should have massacred them. And instead they lost. And the same, I've now that I'm sitting here staring at this, I forgot. Sam Pittman at Arkansas, same deal. You could hold your opponent to 7 points. You hold Mississippi State to 7 points. You should be able to win by at least 3 touchdowns. Sam Pittman's going to make a great offensive line coach for somebody in the SEC. I would guess about this time next year, because I think it's run its course in Arkansas. I think they've started to come around to the fact that Sam Pittman's probably not going to be the guy for them. Had a great start, and that's fine. They'll always have those memories, but you give up 7 points and lose. That's it. Done. Game over. Caleb Williams is going to replace Aaron Rodgers as the NFL's villain quarterback if he keeps it up. And I don't know. I think he might know that, and I think he might be okay with that. But he's really unlikable. There's a lot to not like about Caleb Williams. And this weekend, this last whole week kind of proves it. Just has been pedestrian against top 25 teams, not, completing 50% of his passes. He goes 24 of 34 last night, 256, no touchdowns, no interceptions, an uninspired effort against a banged up Utah team that it's just like, you're better than that. And I don't know if his heart's not in it or what. You already start to see hey, now that USC's lost twice, they don't have a path to college football playoff. He should sit out the rest of the season. And I wouldn't put it past him to be like, you know what, I'm not going to play the rest of the season. And I wouldn't put it past him to I didn't like the report that, he's looking for an ownership stake for whatever team that was from a July report that was kind of dubious to begin with. But the kid is really difficult to like the more that he talks. And that's not a great spot to be in. So Caleb Williams, stock down. Oklahoma, despite winning, stock down. They're still undefeated, and I constantly tell people that you can look at the polls and bitch about the polls all you'd like, But a win is a win is a win is a win is a win. And I can't complain about victories. I can't sit here and say, yeah, but they only won by, doesn't matter. Everything that comes before the word but is BS. If you're going to tell me they only won by 2, doesn't matter. Oklahoma hangs on to win a game that they had to win, and yet they didn't look great doing it. And they already weren't getting a lot of love, a lot of pub for being undefeated and having one of the best wins in America. I think when you start stacking, like, who are the best wins? I think Ohio State at Notre Dame is one of the best wins. I think Texas on the road at Alabama is one of the best wins. I think Oklahoma over Texas is one of the best wins. And despite having one of the best wins, they're not getting the love that they probably feel like they deserve. And that game on Saturday is why. There are still glaring holes, but the somewhat weak schedule makes you 7-0, and you get a win over UCF by 2 points. Doesn't matter. You won, but you won. That is true. Michigan State is an absolute dumpster fire, not the football program, like the university and athletic department as a whole. When you have more photos of Adolf Hitler on your scoreboard than points scored, that pretty much is all you have to say about the weekend that was at Michigan State. If you have to release a press release about why a photo in trivia question, like he was some Hollywood starlet, about Adolf freaking Hitler was on your scoreboard, you are having a bad week, and you're going to be in the stock down. Michigan State having a rough year already, and then you've got pictures of Hitler on your scoreboard. What are you doing? Like, that's the easiest thing to sit here and gripe about. Like, nobody's going to be like, well, let's hear him out. Let's understand why they've got photos of Hitler. No. Nobody's going to do that. And yet it's still so incredibly preposterous. What in the hell are you doing? There are legitimate questions about the competency of the entire university. And that's after you fire your head coach, who you gave a really stupid contract to, and it might come out later that you might have given the guy a really stupid contract and then lied about a bunch of stuff to get out of his contract. We'll see. You fired a guy for sexually harassing a sexual assault survivor. Then, just as a university, you had to fire one of your professors because you found out he was wanted for cooking up meth in other states. And then you've got a picture of Adolf Hitler on your scoreboard. What in the hell are you doing? It is unbelievable how dumb and how bad it can be at Michigan State. And then our final stock down is James Franklin. A flat-out, unimaginative, uninspired effort on the national stage, on the biggest stage that Penn State will have this year. Just didn't really look like they were all that interested in competing with Ohio State. Didn't try anything really different. Didn't do a whole lot to try to set up Drew Aller for success. And Penn State got pushed around. The final score doesn't look like that Penn State got pushed around. At one point, like with a minute and 20 seconds to go in the fourth quarter, they had like 6 yards of total offense in the second half. It was not close. It was not all that competitive. And it was basically just coaching. They didn't try anything different. They tried to run a double pass at one point that Ohio State sniffed out really quickly. But a really uninspired effort. And when you then look at the results, that like Penn State has played Ohio State as tough as anybody over the course of the last 10 years. And there are a couple of like 1-point wins for Ohio State or 1-score games for Ohio State. When you end up like having 4 or 5, we lost by 1 score, we were right there. The fact that you've eked out 1 win over the Buckeyes in James Franklin tenure ain't good. And Penn State has to rectify, like, are we okay with going 9-3, 10-2 every year? Because I think you should be. Like, it's not 1983 anymore. Nonetheless, the idea that that is the ceiling at Penn State probably doesn't sit well. And I think they're going to get to be one of those programs that starts to build up apathy because, oh my God, we're only going to win 10 games this year and we're going to lose to Ohio State, Michigan, and play in the Citrus Bowl or whatever. And they'll fire James Franklin eventually, and then they'll hire some mediocre coach and go to the depths and have the same problems that Nebraska is having, where you've got somewhat unrealistic expectations in a modern era. And this is a whole like philosophical rabbit hole we could go down right now. We won't. But James Franklin, the stock is down. And I don't like, this isn't an all-time low or anything like that, but it's not a great stock right now for the leader of the Penn State Nittany Lions, let me tell you. And finally today, we've got the Sunday Stiff Arm Trophy update. I am not a Heisman Trophy voter, would love to be. Let's get in touch. But when you take a look at my Heisman Trophy ballot, we can't, is it stupid to have a Heisman Trophy ballot, a definitive Heisman Trophy ballot on October 22nd? Yeah, but that's what makes college football fun. Michael Penix Jr. would still win the Heisman Trophy in my book. Now, he didn't have a great game, and Washington eked out a win over 1-6 Arizona State. Doesn't matter. Win is a win is a win. He still threw for 275 yards. And they get a win basically on a pick six. The defense won the game for him. But you know what? Not enough to lose it. Jaden Daniels, another really nice game. He's elevated all the way up to my number 2 spot because I think he's playing at a really high level and deserves more pub. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best football player in college football. I don't think it's really close. And he had is coming up on a school record for career 100-yard games at Ohio State, where they've pumped out a lot of first-round wide receivers. And he might be the best of them. But we can have that discussion another day. So that's my Heisman Trophy ballot right now. Michael Penix Jr., Jaden Daniels, Marvin Harrison Jr. in the 1, 2, 3 slots. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Certainly appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out here at Saturday Glory. If you're listening on the podcast, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping us get in front of more college football fans. We'll be back at it tomorrow. We'll see what more develops with this Michigan sign stealing allegations thing. It'll be fun to follow just because the whole espionage is always fun to discuss. And we'll keep track of that for you here on the Daily Huddle from Saturday Glory.